while we're processing it.
Okay. And it is at this time, sir, that you can then instruct or extend the crime scene, can you not?
Yes.
Okay. You can push back the media a bit further, can you not?
Yes.
And any other passerbys.
Yes.
Okay. So that could eliminate that issue, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in addition to that, you have the ability to use what's called a crime scene privacy barrier screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And are you familiar with those?
Yes.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
I'd like for you to take a look at these 3 photographs. And we'll mark them in a second. Would Your Honor prefer I mark them at this point before a question?
No.
Okay. Is this what appears to you to be a crime scene barrier screen? A crime scene barrier screen looks like?
Yes.
Okay. I have them marked.
Any objection, counsel? Sit down.
Just with some limited redactions, comment that I don't object.
You offering how many?
2 photographs.
2 photos.
Yes.
All right, they received exhibits 166, 167.
Unless there's an objection, we would then move this items 166 and 167 in items.
There just needs to be some minor redactions, but other than that, the comment does not object.
I'm sorry, what is it you want to do, Ms. Pius?
We'd like to move these into evidence 166 and 167.
I thought we just did.
I just want to redact this.
Okay.
I won't publish that to the jury. Sir, that is, as you testified, a crime scene barrier screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you see they come in different sizes?
Yes.
And this is also something that is commonly used at crime scenes?
Relatively commonly, yes.
Okay. And this is to prevent anyone from seeing what law enforcement, specifically crime scene personnel, are doing at the scene? That's the purpose of these.
Prohibit them from seeing what we're doing at the scene so much as to protect the public from the aftermath of a violent crime.
And that also includes any scene, correct? There are sometimes scenes that, whether they're violent crimes or not, that law enforcement would like to create barriers for, correct?
I don't know what you mean by any scene.
This is not limited to any specific type of scene. That's my
No,
question.
it's not limited, no.
Okay. Now, you also you have these scenes in the Boston Police Department, correct?
The screens? Yes.
In fact, there's a photograph of one right there, right?
Yes.
And it says Boston Police Department, right here.
Yes, it does.
Crime Scene Response Unit.
Yes, it does.
That would be your unit, right?
Yes.
The unit you're in charge of.
I'm not in charge of the unit, sir.
The unit that you were in charge of that evening.
I was not in charge of the unit. I was supervising personnel.
Okay, the unit you were supervising that evening.
Yes.
All right. Now, you testified that you needed a search warrant to search the vehicles, correct?
I personally didn't need it, but I believe the homicide unit made that decision.
But you gave testimony to this jury
Yes.
under direct examination of Mr. Hagan, correct?
Yes.
Specifically stating that in most, if not all of your crime scenes, it's done this way.
We generally, based on my experience, generally we would get a search warrant under these circumstances or similar circumstances.
And you generally load bodies, dead bodies up on tow trucks and generally take them to a forensic bay for processing.
I would not make a generalization like that, sir.
Okay? And, well, let's clear it up. How many crime scenes have you processed where dead bodies were placed were left in the car, placed on a flatbed tow truck, and driven all the way across town?
I don't know what you mean by all the way across town, but
Let's
I
not
can
play
think of
words. Let's not play
three-
with words, sir. Just anywhere, driven anywhere,
Let the witness answer the question.
driven anywhere.
I can think of at least 3 occasions where we've done that.
Okay, but you told this jury that happens most, if not all, the time.
That is not what I said, sir.
All right, that answer may stand.
You told this jury most of the crime scenes are processed this way. Do you recall making that statement, sir?
Counsel, wasn't that referencing a search warrant?
That's correct, Your Honor.
It was in reference to the way
Put
this
the
was
question.
Yes, sir. It was your testimony, sir, that search warrants are gotten. Or let me rephrase that. First, a search warrant is required, and then later, these items bodies are processed at another location. Do you recall testifying to that?
In this circumstance, we did get a search warrant, and we did process the car at headquarters, yes.
You also testified to this jury that you needed this search warrant to process that vehicle, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you wish to amend that answer, sir?
No.
Okay. Now, I'm going to refer you back to Rule 205, Section 13. Do you recall that, the removal of dead bodies?
Yes.
Would you like to see that regulation again?
Which section are you referring to?
Section 13?
No, I don't think I need to see it again.
Okay. So, are you familiar with, if I can have just a moment, Judge. Sorry. My mistake, sir. Section 15. Are you familiar with Section 15? Vehicles removed from crime scenes.
I'd have to refresh my memory by referring to it, sir.
That evening, when you processed that car, were you familiar with that section?
Again, I'm not sure what you're referring to in Rule 205, what part of Section 205, Section 15 covers, sir.
May I approach the witness, Judge?
You may, certainly.
Section here. Does that refresh your recollection, sir?
Yes.
Now, you're a law enforcement officer, right, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And of course, you understand the nuances of law enforcement.
Objection.
I'll withdraw the question. You're familiar, sir, with Section 15. Are you now familiar? Did that
I've
refresh your
refreshed my
recollection?
memory, yes.
Okay. So you're familiar with the Section 15, which is vehicles removed from crime scenes, correct?
Yes.
And that section reads in part, evidence shall only be removed after being photographed and latent print processing has been completed.
Yes,
Okay. Now, it uses the word shall, correct?
I believe so.
Okay. And the word shall means you must, right?
That's what that word means, yes.
And it doesn't say may, right?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Would you like to look at it again?
No, sir.
You'll take my word for it?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you also do when you take possession of a motor vehicle, you do what's called an inventory search. Correct?
In certain circumstances, yes, an inventory search would be done.
Okay. An inventory search was done on this car, was it not?
The items were observed, and we made note of them. I would not call it an inventory search.
Okay. You're allowed to do an inventory search, and that does not require a warrant, does it, sir?
You cannot bypass a search warrant and use the inventory search to look for stuff.
Okay. Are you testifying, sir, that you need a warrant to conduct an inventory search?
That's not what I'm testifying to. I'm saying you cannot, under the circumstances that you need a search warrant, you cannot say, well, I didn't need a search warrant because I did an inventory search to look for evidence.
That's a determination made by the officer or investigator on the scene, correct?
Objection.
It seems this is a tad far removed, so, Mr. Baez, why don't we move on?
Yes, sir. There you go. Can you zoom into this area? All right, sir. You're aware that you're allowed to photograph items that are in plain view.
Yes,
Okay. You're also aware of what's referred to as exigent circumstances. Correct?
Objection.
I'll see you at sidebar.
I'm going to go specifically to a photograph. That would include this photograph right here, right?
yes,
Okay. A search warrant wasn't needed to render medical aid to the bodies. No.
no,
right?
that's a totally different,
Okay. I'm aware
Question.
of that. I just want to kind of clear these things up. A search warrant also wasn't needed for officers or anyone else to put sheets on the bodies.
I don't know who put the sheets on the body, sir.
That's not what I asked you, sir. A search warrant isn't required to do so.
I don't believe so.
Okay. And the doors were open when medical aid was rendered, correct?
I have no idea.
Fair to say that they would have to open the doors to check and see if the individuals are alive, correct?
I don't know, sir.
Well, the doors would have to be open.
Yes, sir.
You don't know who opened the doors, if in fact they were open. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
And they wouldn't require a warrant to open the door to render medical aid, correct?
I think I've already stated no.
Okay. And they wouldn't require aid to open the door and place the sheets. on
Correct.
bodies. Okay. Now, what we're all talking about is the preservation of the scene, correct?
Objection.
Rephrase, I think we were talking about.
This
something
whole
different.
line of the scene, this whole line of questioning as it relates to the crime scene, we're talking about the proper preservation of evidence so that you can document it, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this is also important for the issues of contamination, right?
I don't know what you mean by contamination.
My question to you, sir, is you don't want to take photographs of a scene that's already been contaminated, right?
I'd prefer not to.
Correct, because that could, of course, affect the investigation in one way or another.
Possibly.
Okay? Now, since you didn't have a warrant, do you see that, sir? On photograph 22?
Yes.
And that appears to be a piece of crime scene tape, correct?
Yes.
In the middle of the car,
Yes.
in the middle of the back seat,
Yes.
stuffed in the back seat.
I don't know if it's stuffed in the back. I see it on the back
You
seat.
see it in between the two, in between where the seat comes out on the bottom and up, right?
Yes.
Okay. And right next to it, right down here, is a projectile.
It's part of a projectile, yes.
Okay. And you collected that projectile as important evidence, right, sir?
The next day.
Okay. After the body was towed, after the car was towed, excuse me.
Yes.
Okay. But it was important enough, and you deemed that an important piece of evidence, would you not?
Yes.
Okay. And that, I guess, ripped piece of crime scene tape doesn't belong there, does it, sir?
I don't know what you mean by belong there. I don't know how it got there, sir, so I don't know the circumstances that it ended up there.
Okay. Is it ideal for you, for an officer, to take a piece of crime scene tape, rip it, go to the back seat of a car where a shooting has occurred, stuff it in there, and leave it there prior to you photographing anything there?
The objection's overruled. If you can answer that, you may.
I don't know the circumstances that happened that ended up there, so I don't know if your description accurately represents what happened, sir.
That's not as it should be for a pristine crime scene, correct?
I don't know what led to that being placed there, sir, so I can't answer that question.
And as the supervisor of those who are processing the scene, that would be important for you to know, wouldn't it?
How that ended up there, it's
Yes, sir.
a question. I don't know the circumstances that led up to that again.
I realize that. You've testified to that. My question to you, sir, is that would be an important piece of information for you to know, right?
I don't know whether it would be important or not, sir, because I don't know how it ended up there.
If I can have just a moment, Judge.
You may.
Now, going back to this set of photographs here, you have part of the proper documentation of all crime scene photos is to take what's called long-range photos, right?
Generally, yes.
Okay.
Overall photos.
Overall photos. And then there's also what's considered mid-range photos, correct?
Yes.
And then after that, you're supposed to take close-up photos.
Correct.
Okay. Now, you're aware of a forensic science that is often referred to as blood pattern analysis.
I'm aware of it, yes.
Okay. And you've attended numerous seminars where this forensic science is discussed.
I've been to seminars where it's been discussed, yes. I have not been to any specialized training in it.
Okay. And you're aware that blood pattern analysis can tell a jury plenty of information about an actual shooting, correct?
I can't answer that question.
Sustained as to the form of the question.
You're aware that blood pattern analysis can shed light on a crime?
In certain circumstances, yes.
Okay. Like, let's certain circumstances like a shooting, right?
I'm not sure how it would play into a shooting.
You're aware of possible what's called high-velocity impact wounds and blood patterns?
Again, I've heard the term, but I'm not especially trained in it.
Okay. But you're trained in taking proper photographs of blood so that this can be later determined by an expert.
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. Let's nail that down a second, sir. You're trained to take proper photographs.
Yes.
Okay. In fact, you took a photography course that you told us about.
Yes.
Okay. And part of that photography course was talking about taking close-up shots, right?
Yes.
With what is referred to as a scale.
Depending on what you're photographing, yes.
Okay. And scale is just another word for ruler.
Yes.
Okay. And this is so we know exactly how big the blood stain is.
It aids in that, yes.
And the size of the blood stain can assist an expert in determining what type of wound that is.
I can't answer that question.
Okay. But you're trained that the reason you do this is so that experts can come later on and give an analysis.
Depending on the circumstances.
So is that a yes?
It depends on, every case is different, sir, depending on the case.
In shooting cases, that would be important information?
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. Now, you're aware that experts can tell the difference between blood that gets spattered from a gunshot versus blood that when someone's bleeding and it's dripping, right?
I can't answer that question, sir. I
You
don't
can't
have-
answer that question at all, sir.
No.
Okay. You're also aware that you can tell a lot by the blood stains because of to determine whether they're actual bleeding wounds versus transfer.
Yes.
Okay. You're also aware that if someone comes and places something like a sheet on top of a body, you can make a determination as to whether that was an actual bleeding blood stain or perhaps the sheets may have affected that.
If you can answer that, you may.
I can't answer that question that way, no.
All right. Now, sir, you mentioned you attended a class at the Henry Lee Institute.
I went to a class put on by the Henry Lee Institute.
Okay. And are you familiar, you would agree that Henry Lee's Crime Scene Handbook is an authoritative book and treatise in the field of crime scene investigations?
I haven't read the book, sir.
That's not what I asked you. I asked you, would you agree that Henry Lee's Crime Scene Investigation Handbook is an authoritative book in the field of crime scene investigations?
I don't know, sir.
You supervise crime scene investigators?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know the name of any books that are authoritative in the field of crime scene investigation?
Overruled.
Practical Crime Scene Investigation is one of the books that
Written by
I'm
who,
familiar
sir?
with. I don't recall the author, sir.
Okay. So, do you recognize Henry Lee as an authority in the field of crime scene investigations?
No, this is different. Overruled.
Yes, I would think that he's an authority.
In fact, he has a big institute in Connecticut, right?
Correct.
And many law enforcement come from across the country to attend his lectures and courses.
I believe so.
Okay. Would you have any disagreement with the fact that Henry Lee's Crime Scene Handbook is an authoritative treatise in that field of criminal or crime scene investigations?
Sustained.
Would you consider Henry Lee's Crime Scene Handbook an authoritative treatise in crime scenes investigations?
Counsel, he hasn't read it. How can he answer that?
Well, if he may be aware, he's aware of the expert, he's aware of the courses that's
Not of the content.
very well, sir. Now, sir, I want to direct your attention to this photo. Can you see that on your screen, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That will qualify as a mid-range photograph, would it not?
Mid-range to close-up, yeah.
Okay. It's not a close-up because you don't have a scale on that photo, correct?
There's no scale in the photo, no.
Okay. And for close-up photos, you're required to use a scale, are you not, sir?
Generally, you would have a scale, yes.
And that's so we would know how big certain marks are on there, correct?
Yes,
Okay. Now, you're aware that glass, as you see it breaks down, do you see how it breaks down into little tiny pieces?
yes, sir.
Okay. And you're aware that glass can give you, an investigator, all kinds of information about gunshots, correct?
It can give some indication, yes.
Okay. Not only can it tell you how many bullet holes it has in it, correct? It can tell you that?
Sometimes.
Okay. It can tell you which bullet holes came first, can it not, sir?
In certain circumstances, it could. I can't say that this photograph is one of those circumstances.
I'm not asking you about the photograph being the circumstance. I'm asking you about glass being able to make those determinations.
Counsel, let me see you at sidebar.
Automotive glass cracks in a certain way, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. No foundation is expertise.
If you know that to be the case, you may answer that.
I know that window glass, as I see it on the photo that you presented me, when it's broken, it shatters into tiny pieces.
And this glass and this photograph, let me strike that. The glass at this scene was never collected by you, sir.
No,
And it was never collected by anyone else that you directed.
no,
And it was never collected by any officer on the scene.
no.
Okay. And this precludes an expert from going back or any crime scene investigator from going back and attempting to obtain this information, correct?
Objection.
Overruled.
It prevents them from going back and collecting that glass, yes.
Okay. And this analysis can't be done by a photograph, can it, sir?
What analysis?
The analysis of determining what gunshots came first and how many gunshots a automotive glass has on it.
I'm not sure that could have ever been done in this case.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't ask you if that could be done, sir. And the proper analysis could never be done because it was never collected, right?
Sustained in that form.
The proper analysis of automotive glass can never be done unless you collect it, right?
Objection.
Sustained in that form.
Any analysis cannot be done of automotive glass unless it's collected.
Objection.
I think you're asking, assuming an analysis could be done,
Correct.
would you agree it cannot be done if the glass is not collected and preserved?
Assuming that an analysis could be done, then you could not do it without the glass, correct?
And you, of course, have testified that as the supervisor of the crime scene personnel that are on the scene are not trained in this area, so you have no idea.
Trained in what, sir?
In the analysis of gunshot through glass.
No, we're not trained how to do that, sir.
If I can have just a moment, Judge, I'm almost done. Sir, I'd like to now discuss with you the issues dealing with Exhibit 164 and 165. These are the projectiles. Do you recall that testimony you gave in the direct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as we're looking at these items, you can tell that they are outside of the paper evidence collection envelope. Wouldn't you agree? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Now, sir, you're trained in the proper collection of potential DNA evidence, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, reproach.
You may.
May I take those items back before we...
And put it in paper envelopes, yes.
Okay. And the reason for this is that so there are no, there's no degradation of evidence, correct?
I don't know what you're referring to. I've never heard of any degradation of ballistic evidence.
You're aware, for example, I'll use DNA as an example, that you are not supposed to place an item that's to be tested for DNA or may be tested for DNA in a plastic container, correct?
Generally, it would be placed in a paper container.
And that is because heat and moisture can degrade DNA, correct?
DNA evidence, yes.
Okay. And should it become later, and this, let me rephrase that, this responsibility stays with law enforcement throughout the course of a case, correct?
Objection.
If you can answer that, you may.
I don't know what you're referring by responsibility throughout a case.
I'll rephrase the question. While the evidence is in your control, it is always to be properly maintained.
It should be properly maintained, yes.
Okay. And you notice that these two items for which you admitted into evidence, there are two projectiles that are outside of the paper and in plastic bags.
Yes.
And that's not as you're supposed to process them, correct?
I don't,
Let me rephrase the question. That's not as you're supposed to preserve them, correct?
I can't answer that question. I don't know how ballistic evidence is preserved, and I don't understand how it could be degraded with plastic.
Then I'll ask this question. That's not how you're supposed to obtain the evidence and control it.
I don't know what you mean by obtain it and control it. When it's recovered, it's placed in a paper envelope.
That's exactly the proper procedure, putting it in a paper envelope, not a plastic one, right?
It was not placed in a plastic envelope.
That's not the question I asked you. The question I asked you, sir, is that's not the proper procedure. It's supposed to put it in the paper envelope, correct?
It was placed in a paper envelope, sir.
So the answer to my question is yes. It's supposed to go in a
When-
paper.
When it's collected, it should be placed in a ballistic envelope, a paper envelope.
And it's supposed to stay there, correct?
I don't know how they're archived. I don't know how evidence is archived at the Firearms Analysis Unit.
All right, sir. Now, you started taking photographs. I want to backpedal for a moment or backtrack to the actual scene that evening. Now, when it comes to a shooting, I'd like to direct your attention to this diagram. May I pursue it, Mr.
May, sir.
Am I in anyone's way? Assuming this is a rough diagram of the scene, the crime scene tape was set up in this section here, correct? On Harold Street?
Harold Street, yes.
Okay. And then the other crime scene tape was further back on Marginal Street. Is that correct?
I believe it was on Shawmut Ave in front of some cruisers that were parked on Shawmut Ave,
Okay.
maybe near Marginal Street.
Now, a line search was conducted at the crime scene at the end, correct?
Yes.
And part of that line search was from one part of the tape all the way to the other.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And what was done was officers basically line up arm in arm and they search every single inch of this area, correct?
They don't line up arm in arm, they line up
Next to each other.
next to each other.
Okay. And they have their flashlights.
Generally, yes.
Okay. And what's important is to get this area covered as well, correct? To search that area?
It's to search the area from one end to the other.
Okay. And that's possible. Some of the things you're searching for here are possible shell casings.
We were searching the entire area, not just in the area that you are.
I'm specifically directing your attention to this area here, sir.
Okay.
My question to you is, one of the things that you might be looking for at this point in time are shell casings here.
Yes.
Okay. One of the other items you might be looking for are projectiles over here.
We would be looking for any sort of evidence that might be related to the case.
So the answer to my question is yes, sir.
We
You might be looking for projectiles here.
Yes.
And that is if someone shot from the BMW over to this area, you might find a projectile.
If that occurred,
Yes. If that occurred, you might find projectiles over here.
Objection. Also speculation.
I'll rephrase the question.
Rephrase.
One of the reasons you search this area is to search for projectiles that may have come from this car.
we had no, that's not correct at all.
No, the answer may stand. That is not correct.
One of the numerous items that you could search for here are projectiles, right?
Projectiles and shell casings, yes.
Yes. And that's regardless of which car it may have come from.
Again, your question seems to be implying something that I don't have any information about, so I can't answer the question that way.
I'm asking you a question hypothetically here, sir. And the reason you would search this area, of course, is because items from either location may have ended up over here. How about that?
When we did the line search, I believe we were looking for ballistics that may have impacted the BMW and bounced off of it.
Okay. And now, you weren't at the scene that night,
I was at the scene that night.
at the time of the incident.
At the time of the incident, no.
Okay. So you don't know what happened there.
No, I don't.
In fact, you don't know what type of firearm is used from the shooting vehicle, which may have been over here.
Correct.
That could have been a revolver.
At the time of the incident, I
could
had
have
no
been a
idea.
revolver?
Could have been a revolver, yes.
Could have also been a semi-automatic.
At the time of the incident, yes, it could have
And
been.
that night, you have no idea which one it is.
Correct.
And a semi-automatic spits out shell casings.
Yes.
Okay? And you also don't know what was going on in the BMW.
No.
Okay? So you don't know if any firearms were in there.
Objection.
Not overruled.
Based on my response to the scene and the evidence I saw at the BMW, there was no indication that there were any firearms fired from there.
Now, there's an indication to you, sir, at that point, that 3 gentlemen were in the backseat of that car.
I received information while I was at the scene that there may have been 3 people in the back seat.
Okay? And you received information that 2 of those men fled the scene.
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you receive information that 2 of the 3 individuals left the scene, sir?
Objection.
Sustained.
Do you know or have any evidence as to what any individuals in the back seats had in their possession that evening?
No.
Now, if a street sweeper went through that area, sir, would that have possibly taken evidence, important crime scene evidence with it?
Objection.
Overruled. If you can answer that based on your training and experience, you may.
Depending on where the evidence was and the path of the street sweeper, that's a possibility.
Okay. And if you take a street sweeper and it is dumped out, the hopper is dumped out, have you ever had to process a street sweeper before?
No, sir.
And is that because a street sweeper doesn't usually go through a crime scene?
Objection.
Overruled.
I've never experienced a street sweeper going through a crime scene.
And that's a pretty odd event, wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Objection.
Overruled.
If I can have just one moment, Judge, I'm almost done. Now, sir, you wrote a report in this case, did you not?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and in the report, you discuss line search.
Yes.
Okay, and in your report, you write, you note that the line search began at 5:16 a.m.
I don't recall the exact time.
If I show you a copy of your report, would that refresh your recollection, sir?
I believe I have a copy of it, if that's okay.
Go ahead. It's the last paragraph of your report, sir.
Yes.
And started at 5:16 a.m.,
Yes.
and you searched that entire area.
I personally did not.
Well, the line search searched the entire area and was concluded at 5:20 a.m.
Yes.
in 4 minutes.
Yes.
Now, finally, sir, I want to show you a copy of the search warrant that you testified to this jury about. You needed this search warrant, according to your testimony, to search the car, right?
I didn't need it. A search warrant was needed to search and recover evidence from the car.
I'm showing you, sir, a copy of what is listed as the search warrant of this vehicle in this case. Do you see that, sir?
Yes.
You recognize that, sir?
Yes.
Okay. In order to search this vehicle, you have to check certain boxes off, right?
Someone does, yes.
Okay. And could you tell us what the first box that is checked that describes the BMW?
Is he the affiant?
No, Your Honor.
What is that?
Then why don't we mark this for identification?
Yes, sir.
Q for identification.
I'm showing you what is marked as Q for identification.
Okay.
Okay. Do you see the first box that is checked off?
Objection.
As sustained.
Okay. May I have a moment, Judge?
Yeah, not the right witness, I think, Mr. Baez. We can receive that for identification. This witness has identified it as the warrant used in this case. Further inquiry, I think, is made through another witness.
Yes, sir. Let me ask you a couple more questions about this, sir. As the person who conducted or processed this car, participated in it, you have testified that you needed a warrant, correct?
A warrant was necessary,
A
yes.
warrant was necessary. And as part of this process, it is you are required to convey information to the detectives who may fill out this warrant, right?
To fill out the warrant?
Yeah. You have to give them information so they know what to put in the petition for the warrant, right?
I did not relay any information that was used in the search warrant, I don't believe.
So you didn't relay anything to the detectives as the supervising crime scene investigator in order to actually process this car?
As far as the warrant, there were detectives from the homicide unit at the initial crime scene. I believe they had the information they needed. I don't know what's in the warrant,
And
sir.
you didn't give them any information from what you saw at that scene to assist them in deciding what they needed to put in here to ask for the search warrant?
I'm sure I had conversations with them at the scene. I don't believe the conversation had anything to do with applying for a search warrant or regarding the affidavit for a search warrant.
Were you the one that conveyed to them that this BMW was used as a means of committing a crime?
Sustained.
I could have one moment, Judge.
Mr. Baez, anything further?
No, sir.
All right. We'll take our lunch and recess and resume at 2 p.m.
All right, please.